the 200 and 400 meter races, even though the same techniques and race models apply, we need to make a few adaptations because we're running on a bend. And one of the first ones we have to do is how we set up our blocks. Because of course we want to accelerate in a straight line, but where I've set the blocks up in a straight line here, if I were to accelerate in a straight line, I'm going to run out into the outside lane here. So we need to set up our blocks in a way that allows us to create the straightest line possible and also allows us to pick up the bend. So the first thing we're going to do is to move the blocks from the middle of the lane to the outside of the lane. And that way we can use them to create a much longer straight line from the outside to picking up the inside of the lane. So where are we aiming for on the bend? Well, of course we're aiming for the inside lane, but we don't want to aim straight at the lane because this is where our center of mass is going to be. And if we step on the inside lane, we're going to be disqualified. So we're aiming for somewhere a foot inside that line, which allows me space to pick up the lane, but gives me space to run on the inside of the lane without encroaching the line too much. So the final adaptation we need to make into the blocks is to realize that we haven't set up our blocks in line with the start line. And that means we need to imagine our own start line to make sure that everything is lined up and square. So of course our outside hand can be on the line, but our left hand is going to imagine that line in the same line as we set up our blocks, and we're going to place it under our shoulder along that imaginary line. So that if we put our left hand on the line, we're going to get this rotation in our shoulder. That's not an efficient way to accelerate. So by bringing it back onto our imaginary line, our shoulders are square and we're ready to push. Now of course that means also as we set up our blocks, we need to use that imaginary line to get our spacings right. So we know that we're 2 feet and 3 feet from the line. So we can have 1, 2, 3 to the back block because we're using the start line. But we need again to imagine where that imaginary start line is, and we count our 2 feet from that position. So we've now got our blocks set up. That's going to give us the longest possible straight line for our acceleration, and it's going to pick up the inside of the lane as we meet the bend. Now what that angle is going to be is obviously going to be determined by the lane we have. So in the 200 and 400 meter races, the inside lane, we only have a very short period of time before we meet the curve. So the blocks are going to be almost the same as they would be in a 100 meter race. On the outside, we have that long sweeping bend. We can use the whole lane and we can create a really long straight line. So most athletes prefer to be in the outside lanes rather than the inside lanes for the 200 meters and the 400 meters. Now, as we accelerate through here, so we're in lane 6 here, we're going to have a reasonably long acceleration phase, but we might be able to get through to 15 or 20 meters before we have to transition onto the curve. But you know, our acceleration phase and our transition phase takes us all the way out to 50 or 60 meters as an elite runner. So we're going to run here, pick up the curve, but remember that this isn't the end of our transition phase. Our transition and our acceleration is going to take us all the way through to 50 meters, which is halfway around the bend, before we climb up into our final sprinting position.